starting down their dirt driveway and headed to town. 20 minutes later, they stopped for fuel in Cowtown, a small settlement in the plains of eastern Montana, where they filled up and got back on the road. They arrived at their hunting camp in the heart of the ranch at noon and unloaded the truck, putting their clothes in the bunk cabin, food in the cook shack, and guns in a green Ford Expedition aptly named the Death Wagon. A little while later, they were making dust fly down the bumpy dirt road to the first prairie dog town. Pulling up to a small rise above the dog town, James parked the Death Wagon. Getting out, they grabbed their AR-15s from beside them. Their ARs were things of beauty, with collapsible buttstocks, foregrips, bipods, and attachments on the rails for flashlights. Connor's was a Bushmaster with a 16-inch barrel and a 4x32 Trijicon ACOG optic, while James's was an S&W with a 16-inch barrel and 1-4x24 Vortex illuminated scope. They each shoved a magazine into their rifles and jacked around into the chamber. Lying prone, they looked down at the prairie dog town spread before them. "I have 2 spotted," James said, "about 200 yards out. Go to the right of the lone tree, about 10 yards, then down a little." "Got 'em," Connor said before James could finish talking. "You take the one on the left and I'll get the one on the right. You lead." James had his crosshairs resting on the vermin the whole time Connor had been talking. When Connor finished, James slowly exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The prairie dog did a backflip as the 55-grain bullet collided with its body. Before the dog could land, Connor let a round fly, blowing the head off the other one. "Good shot," James said, congratulating his brother. "Okay, I got another set a little farther out, 300 yards this time. The big black hole, straight out." Connor's confirmation came a second later. "Target acquired. I'll take point this time. Same side as always." Aiming through their scopes at their prospective prairie dogs, they rested their reticles on the vermin. The shots were less than a second apart, and both dogs were dead after the dust settled. They continued for the next few hours, picking out prairie dogs and blasting them. They didn't always hit their mark, but the next time they made sure to correct their aim and not jerk the trigger. At the end of the day, back at camp, they cooked up a hearty dinner of venison. They had shot close to 200 rounds each and killed almost as many prairie dogs. It had been a good day of hunting, and they ate while watching Shooter on the small TV at camp before going to bed. The next morning, they went out early to coyote hunt, killing 3. During the middle of the day, they were out prairie dog hunting again, as the rodents liked it when it was hot. All in all, the brothers spent a beautiful weekend at the ranch. On Monday, they closed camp and loaded everything back into James's truck. They bumped along the rugged dirt road and finally made their way onto the paved road that led into town. But when they pulled into town around 8 a.m., they hadn't passed a single vehicle. "This is weird," James mumbled as he drove toward Main Street, heading for the grocery store. Turning the corner, they gasped. The street was littered with abandoned cars. Some had crashed into buildings, and others looked like they had been left in a hurry. But that wasn't the worst of it. There were bodies. Dead bodies, lying all over the street and slouched in the vehicles. "What the?" James said as he took in the scene. "What happened here?" Connor asked. The first body they reached was lying face down in the middle of the street. They got out of the truck, grabbing their holstered handguns and slipping them onto their belts. Slowly, they approached the body. "Hey, are you okay?" James asked. He was bending down to examine the body when the smell hit him. It was the stench of meat rotting in the hot sun. He'd smelled it before, but only with animals, never humans. Connor's training began to kick in. As a Marine, he'd been trained to survive, and even though his military career had been cut short and he'd never seen combat, his instincts were still strong. He was treating this like a war zone, except something wasn't right. If this was an attack by another country, where were all the soldiers? Or did this have something to do with all the blackouts? He couldn't put his finger on it, but something was terribly wrong with this situation. James rolled the body over while Connor stayed 2 steps behind, hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Holy," James said, covering his mouth with his hand. The corpse was bloated, with a gaping wound at his neck and a hole in his head. "He's been here at least a day. And bro, he's been shot in the head." "We need to get back to the truck and get out of here," Connor said with an edge to his voice. Something was